Hello, everybody. I am Francis Kong. I am now your host again for one of these really great, cool Comic-Con panels. And today we are with a bunch of really amazing guests, and we're going to talk about some really cool topics. Specifically, the main core is how has superheroes affected and influenced and inspired a group of people who are now really making powerful impacts in the world of education and teaching. And so without further ado, let's jump into that. And also let us introduce these panels or panelists here on this panel one by one so you all know who we are having the pleasure to be able to chat with today. So I'll go in the order I see right here. The first we see in the awesome Punisher shirt here is Eric Basu. Eric Basu is a former Navy SEAL commander, and he also was the author of what was the name of that again, Eric?
Post-Objectivist. I read a blog called
Post-Objectivist, yes. The Post-Objectivist blog, which I've read several times and has some amazing content there. Some where he takes actual, uh, his experience in the combat field and shares how he also channels that into his work as now an entrepreneur. He is a very, very successful founder of a company that actually does cybersecurity consulting for the US government, worth millions of dollars and making great impact in protecting cybersecurity space. And now as the founder of a brand new game called The World of Haiku, which is a role-playing game specifically designed to teach cybersecurity skills, but in a role-playing environment set in the year 2049 in a cyberpunk universe. So as you play the game and progress in it, you actually get real-world cybersecurity hacking skills that can actually be translated into real-world cybersecurity jobs that are easily in a six-figure salary. So without even having to go to all the traditional types of training you have to go to, you play the game, you're way ahead of the curve in just getting a really great high-paying career set up for you already. So thank you, Eric, for joining us. Next, we have Tina Kim. Tina, welcome. And Tina is an award-winning middle school teacher in San Jose. She has pioneered many, many new different ways of teaching her students with creativity. As you can see behind her, she is an extremely creative individual. I believe that she has created all of those mosaics by hand. Big Disney fan and works specifically using video games and pop culture movie references to teach her students. She's also was a delegate member of the court of Miss Asian Global 2018, I believe, and won the title of Miss Scholastic during for Miss Asian Global pageant. And she continues to teach today in San Jose and also has pioneered special fashion course designs within middle school to teach creativity, thinking, innovation, and also teaches some emphasis in cosplay to really bring out the creativity and the pop culture for students. So thank you for joining us, Tina. Always a pleasure to have you here. And finally, we have Jim Quick here. Jim, I think many people who have read the book Limitless knows Jim. He is an amazing leader and performer, consultant. He really specializes in memory. A very interesting story that some of us have learned about Jim was that he actually suffered a childhood memory or a childhood brain injury that really changed his ability to learn, but that because of that, it really helped him focus on really zeroing in cognitive abilities. He's dedicated his life since then to helping others unleash really true powerful memory powers within their genius, their secret genius. He's the CEO of Quick Learning, and that which is basically a really strong online educational academy, and just exists in 195 countries if I'm not mistaken. He has amazing clients such as Google, Virgin, Nike, SpaceX, that's so cool, and has worked in areas of the Cleveland Clinic, Harvard, and Singularity University. Of course, everyone knows that he was a New York Times bestseller list, and is really working on new books and how to really improve and unlock your exceptional life through the book of Limitless. And he also has his own podcast, which he calls Quick Brain. And you can also tune into that and check out some of those amazing guests I've seen. Some of my favorite ones, Larry King, who you got a chance to interview, I think was awesome. So welcome here, Jim Quick. such a great panelist here. So without further ado, let me jump right into it. I've talked enough now. Let's get to you guys. Uh, the core of this is not just about teaching and innovation in teaching, but it's also about how heroes, superheroes have influenced you guys in terms of your mission and impact and how you live your life and the philosophies as role models. So I'm gonna jump back to you, Eric. Eric, do you have a favorite superhero or superheroes from your childhood that served as types of role models, and why were they the ones that you held on to during parts of your life as you grew, but stayed that sense of role models for you?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? And I collected comics as a kid, and I'm a huge comic book fan now still. So that's a hard question. It's like, what's your favorite food or what's your favorite movie? It depends on the night. When you asked me this the first time, though, I thought about it, and I thought there's actually two that I have, and they're almost diametrically opposed. One is the old Captain Marvel, which was the DC version of Captain Marvel, which is now called Shazam. Through a variety of trademarking, because they kept trading the trademark around and all that. But he was the original one. He's the one that would say Shazam. It would transform from Billy Batson, the orphan, the crippled orphan, into one of the most powerful characters in the universe. He's one, and then the contrarian hero I have besides that is Frank Miller's Daredevil. And the reason really these two I look at them is the original Captain Marvel. He was sort of the purest form, right? And this is back in the golden age of comics when, superheroes certainly didn't swear, they didn't do anything bad, they never killed anybody, they were really the purest form. And now that changed, in the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s mostly. And then after that in 2000, we had a number of graphic novels where even Superman, they had different alternate universes or real universe threads where the superheroes would make very human foibles. They would make mistakes, they would do bad things, they had moral lapses. But for the most part, with a few exceptions, maybe in Kingdom Come you could argue, the original Captain Marvel, Shazam, he was the purest form of it. He went from an innocent, right, the crippled Billy Batson, into the purest form, who always fought for good and evil. And that was what we wanted, superheroes for back in the golden age during World War II, where there was real world, there's always real world evil, but we had real world evil at that point, marching across the world and threatening to take over everything in the form of the Nazis and other forms of totalitarian governments that were doing that. And we really needed something, we needed some sort of basis. This is pre certainly any kind of large media, and even the largest videos. We needed that. Juxtaposed to that is Frank Miller's Daredevil, from the 80s, who was certainly a flawed individual. I think in one of the storylines, one of the panels, they say that he's extremely talented, but his head is a snake bit. Certainly, we look at that and we say, that could be us at our worst. But then we had Captain Marvel, which is what I aspire to be in our best. And so the two of those, I kind of keep them in my mind as I look at all other superheroes. And I think we certainly aspire for this, right? And depending upon whatever your religious, tenet is, we all have something we aspire to, something that brings us closer to God, or, something that brings us closer to the ideal of perfection. And then we have this, which is us, as the sinners, if you would. This is the reality of what we are as humans, and what we, the mistakes that we make on a daily basis, and how we try to be less of this and more of this. And that is a daily struggle, I think, for every human being.
Well, I love that. And you're right, those are two really big dichotomies. The Golden Age Shazam and Frank Miller Daredevil, both heroes. The Daredevil is almost an anti-hero at some level, right?
He gets there.
Yeah, exactly. And yet you see him try his best to emerge from what he's been given to be the best version of himself that he can be, over and over and over again, right? And I think that's the human struggle. But then you have the ideal that we use as a beacon too. Excellent, I love that. That's a great dichotomy.
Thank you.
Yeah, throwing the boat over to you here. Your superheroes from childhood, they could be anything that you saw from pop media that you really were inspired by, that helps you right now live that spirit.
My favorite superhero would probably be Starfire. So I grew up watching like the Saturday mornings, cartoons, and then Teen Titans would show. And I actually love all the characters on there, but the character that like I most relate to is Starfire. Like she's an alien, and I feel like sometimes when I'm in my classes, like I feel like I'm a very different person. I feel like I'm like different from everyone else. But I really love her bubbly nature. Like no matter how like anyone treats her differently or they're mean to her, like she's still bubbly. She still like sees the goodness in other people. Her bubbly nature is what I really like as well. She always has a reason to smile, and I really want to, and like I really just like her personality. She's also really like cool. Like she can fly, she can shoot laser out of her eyes. So I think that's pretty fantastic. Um, yeah, so yeah, and I did play some computer games, and that's when I got into video games as well. But like they had like this online game with her fighting and so forth. But yeah, that's what I really like. So Starfire is my favorite character.
I can see that. I can see Starfire does stand out in the Teen Titans, mainly that she is an alien. And no matter, you know what I've noticed about Starfire is that I think she's the eternal optimist in the group.
She's very
Like no matter
optimistic.
what happened, like you really can't rain on her parade. She's the one who kind of keeps everyone like, come on, gang, we can do this. And she's almost like the heart in the sense of the group, and really just keeps the group almost like as a cheerleader. And she has so much power. She's also royalty too on top of that, and she downplays that. She's actually a princess of an entire planet, that she doesn't really showcase that. In fact, she actually doesn't even talk about it so much, only brings it up when she needs to save her planet, right? But otherwise, she's pretty much one of the most grounded people there, with just an always a very optimistic way of looking at the world that's not even her home world. So that I can see her being a lot of her personality. I can see reflected in you and how you handle your way of teaching. That's really cool. All
I
right.
do agree with that with the downplaying of the princess stuff because like for the pageant, like for my title,
Yes.
Miss Asian Scholastic, I actually did it on cockroaches, and then they're like, okay, so what was the topic you did? I was like, oh, I just did this research, and I'll just keep that on the down low. But yeah, so that's really relevant.
I can see that you are a princess. You're literally a real world princess yourself, and I can see a lot of times you downplay that when a lot of people would actually use that on their resume to further themselves, but you actually just kept that in the background because that's something that you did for your own responsibility in your own self, for your own community. So it's awesome. All right, thank you so much, Tina. Okay, throwing the ball over to you, Jim. Favorite superheroes. We had a discussion, I think, briefly in one of my interviews with you, but I love the stories you have. Favorite superheroes and why were they important to you, your childhood growing up?
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough one. I would say my favorite growing up were the X-Men, not because they were necessarily the strongest, but more because they didn't fit in. And I felt like I didn't fit in going through school. You mentioned in the intro that I had a traumatic brain injury when I was 5, and while I was in class in kindergarten, had a very bad fall, and from there I had these learning challenges. I had horrible focus, a really bad memory. Teachers would repeat themselves over and over again, and I would pretend to understand, but I didn't really understand. Took me an extra 3 years just to learn how to read. And it's interesting. I taught myself how to read by reading comic books late at night. When my parents thought I was sleeping, I'd be underneath the covers with a flashlight, and I don't know, something about the illustrations, it just brought the words to life. Something about good versus evil, something about one person can make a difference. These incredible themes of, people who have discovered and developed their superpowers, but they also use it for good, and for real hope, and they give people real help. And but with me, I had these challenges all through school, so I taught myself, and that was my connection to the superheroes. And I when I was 9 years old, I remember in class, I was slowing down the entire class, and a teacher pointed to me in front of the whole class, and because I was being kind of teased and bullied for it, and she pointed to me and said, "That's the boy with the broken brain." And it's just that became my identity early on. And so I felt like that I didn't fit in, just like the X-Men. They were a little bit marginalized. They were very different. They were mutants, and I felt like I was a mutant. And so I really identified with that. Spider-Man also, just because, not because he was so smart, because I was the opposite, but just, he was kind of bullied and kind of invisible. And that was my superpower growing up. I felt like I was becoming invisible, because when you don't have the answers, you don't want to get called on, you don't have the answers. It was, my superpowers were shrinking. I would sit all the way in the back. I would sit behind the tall kid in class. I would do a book report, but if a teacher asked me to do it, just talk about it, I would lie and say I didn't do it because I was so,
Wow.
phobic of this, which is interesting, right? My two biggest challenges were learning and public speaking. And Universe has a sense of humor, because that's all I do is public speak on this thing called learning. But that's what I love about superheroes. They're not perfect, but through struggles, you find your strengths or maybe your superpowers, and so I really loved and really connected with the X-Men.
I love that. And what the theme I'm getting here is the superheroes that you identify with and became your favorites wasn't based on their powers. It was based on their situations and based on how they dealt with them, their personalities, their characters, and essentially how they overcame those obstacles. That's a common thing I'm hearing from all of you, is it was their situations, not their abilities, which were fantastic, but that was never brought up here in terms of like, that's why I like this character. It was essentially who they were as identifiable individual characters. I think that's amazing. I think that there needs to be a lot more credit due how much work goes into development of comic book characters. I think we're starting to see that now, and finally in this age. But I remember growing up, no one took them seriously, but the amount of work it takes to develop Peter Parker, right? The amount of work it takes to develop Matt Murdock and the character, I can't even say Starfire's alien name. That all of those takes time to create and also fit into the universe that they're going to engage with. So I think that's an amazing feat that kids growing up can see that and click with that right away. That's awesome. All right, so then based on that, what would you say was the trigger for you to start looking at teaching as something, teaching people new skills and knowledge as something that you would want to do professionally with the projects that you're involved with right now? So let's jump back over to you, Eric. How did you discover that was something that you want to do professionally now in terms of how you want to impact the world?
Yeah, I mean, this would be in the context of the haiku cyber range
Absolutely.
we developed. Yep. Yeah. We were interviewing a lot of people for cybersecurity jobs, and we found that there was a real lack of people who had practical hands-on experience. One example, we interviewed a lady who had a master's degree in cybersecurity, and she had a number of certifications, but she couldn't actually do anything on the computer. And interestingly, a lot of the people, particularly in offensive cybersecurity skills, which would be called certified ethical hacking or penetration testing, you find a number of people who are really, really talented at that, who are somewhere on the Asperger's scale. And I can see why that would be the case, is because a lot of hacking, certified ethical hacking, penetration testing is sitting at a computer for hours and hours at a time, figuring out how do I get in, tracking different things. But I thought, what if we can train a much wider variety of people on how to do this, rather than you have people that are naturally gifted at doing this, right? And I think that kind of goes back to what Jim's saying, is that you can train pretty much, you should be able to train any human to be able to do any set of skills. Some people are just going to be better at it, but everyone should be able to adapt to a set of skills that any other human can do. So it's really, it's not necessarily like people can do something they're good at as a superpower that nobody else can attain. It's a superpower that everybody else can attain, if simply given the right form of teaching. And that was kind of where we were going with haiku. And so we came up with the idea of doing role-playing games, and role-playing games are extremely addictive. I played Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid, and I can tell you now the difference between a trebuchet, an arbalest, and a ballista. I can tell you the difference between a hippogriff and a manticore. Completely useless bits of information that will never do anything for me in my life. But we thought, what if we could take the addiction that comes with being playing a role-playing game, where you are the part of the hero's story, right? You're advancing and leveling up your character, which is a very human sort of thing. We all want to progress. And you
Right.
can do that and actually level yourself up in real life, where the things, these little bits of information you're getting actually help you to, get a real world job, and something that, normally people that wouldn't be attracted to a STEM curriculum because they just weren't naturally good at it. Let's give them the ability to learn these same set of skills, but do it in a format that actually allows their brain to, get their head around this. And that was where we came. We've gotten great reception. We launched back in December of last year. We've gotten great reception both from, potential investors, and then from people that are doing it. And, I'm actually really excited about it because there's a huge lack of cybersecurity, properly trained cybersecurity people. I think 3.5 million is the number that the number of unfilled jobs we're going to have in 2021. And so there's a real need to get people into these high paying jobs.
Excellent. I love that. That's a very powerful mission, both to serve the community, but also to get people into positions where they can be self-sufficient and be able to provide for themselves and their families with actual skills that are of value right now to community and society. So excellent. I love that. Tina, why did you decide to take on teaching as a profession now?
I actually fell into teaching, actually. I think originally I was a pre-med background, as most typical, like, I guess, for me and for Asians. Yeah, so I was doing pre-med, and then one of my classmates actually had a seizure, and then I froze. So usually when I see someone in pain or blood, I freeze. But my grades were high. I had like a straight A, 4.0, and I was like, okay, at least I have the knowledge of it, and I can actually communicate it. So then I fell into teaching after subbing, and then I fell in love with it. And whenever I see students struggle like that and they're trying to push themselves, I said, it's fine, like focus on your strengths. And I loved like focusing on that as well. And yeah, I like to embed pop culture currently, like whatever students are connected with, because right now it's hard with connection with the pandemic that's going. So like the common game like Among Us, or maybe like some of the students really love Harry Potter with the pop culture. Sometimes I embed superheroes. I always throw a monster on my test because like students get a lot of test anxiety. So I would tell like students, like treat it like a video game. When you're doing homework, it's like you're grinding, you're leveling up. And then like the mini bosses are like your test and quiz. And then usually like there's a theme. Like if I'm talking about rocks, I'll throw like a rock monster on the test. And, that basically helps like, them see that this is more like, a game instead of like feeling all that anxiety that's coming on. And then I try to help with the connection right there with like things that they love by listening to what they enjoy. So yeah, that's how I fell into teaching, basically like using my passions of like video games, Disney, like anything that's out there that I'm reading, and then now connecting with the kids as well.
That's awesome. I wish I had a teacher like you when I was growing up. That would have been awesome. Okay, great. And I love the fact that you throw in what they already are familiar with and comfortable with into the mix so that it's more aligned with that mentality than traditional test taking exams. Great. All right, Jim, over to you. What inspired you, or what helped you decide to go and make it your mission to help people learn and really utilize their innate educational abilities better?
I guess you could say my inspiration was my desperation. As I mentioned, that I struggled throughout school until the age of 18. I was lucky enough to get into a local university. Thought being a freshman meant I could make a fresh start, and I took all these classes, and I wanted to show the world, show myself that I was capable of something, and I actually did worse. And I was, thinking about even quitting. I'm the oldest of 3 siblings, and my parents, they immigrated to the US and didn't speak the language. My mom lived in the back of a laundromat that my mom worked at, kind of thing. And it was just, we didn't have the funds to be there. And so I didn't want to waste the money, and I wasn't sure if I should leave or not. And so I make one last ditch effort to really study, and I don't eat, I don't sleep, I don't do anything but live in the library. I work my brains out, and I end up passing out in the library. I fall down a flight of stairs, and I hit my head again, which is, I'm on a roll. Then I woke up in the hospital bed, and at this point I was wasting away. I was down to about 117 pounds. I had lost all this weight. I thought I died. It was the darkest time in my life. When I woke up, I was hooked up to all these IVs, and I just thought there had to be a better way. And And I had that thought. The nurse came in with a mug of tea, and on it had a picture of Albert Einstein, which is like the opposite of what I felt like I was. And there's this quote that I'll always remember, and we've all heard this quote in some iteration. It said, "The same level of thinking that's created your problem won't solve your problem." And it made me ask a new question. I think a lot of change happens when students, teachers, parents, any age or stage, we're asking new questions because we'll get new answers. And thought, like, what's my real challenge here? It's like I'm a very slow learner, and I thought, well, how do I learn differently? How do I think differently about it? Well, maybe I can learn how to learn. And I was like, okay. And I asked the nurse for a course bulletin for next semester's classes, and I go through it, hundreds of pages, and they're all classes on what to learn. Math, history, science, Spanish, important classes on what to learn, but there were 0 classes on how to learn. No class on focus or concentration, on memory, on reading faster, the things that we teach. And I think that's something that I've dedicated my life to, is filling in that gap, because the subjects will always change. But if you can learn how to learn and concentrate and do these things, then you can apply that towards, math, marketing, money, management, Mandarin, music, and everything, martial arts, everything gets easier. And so I thought it was really interesting that school taught us what to learn, but not how. And so I started studying those subjects instead. And about, so ancient mnemonics, what did people do before there was printing presses? How do they remember things? The art and science of speed reading, multiple intelligence theory, adult learning, and neuroscience, right? I wanted to figure out this riddle. How does our brain work so we can work our brain, right? How does memory work so we can work our memory? And I started to get quick answers. And after a couple of months, like a light switch flipped on, and I felt like for the first time I had these like real superpowers. My grades shot up, but not only that, with that, my life just got better. But the reason, to answer your question, I couldn't help but help other people, because I was really upset that there were simple things I could have done along the way that would have made learning a lot easier, that I wasn't taught. So I started to tutor. And one of my very first students, she was a freshman in college, and she read 30 books in 30 days. And that's not skim or scan, but really read them. And I wanted to find out not how she did it. I know how, I taught her, but I want to know why. And one of the reasons I love superheroes is their mission, their why. And I found out her mother was dying of terminal cancer and was only given by doctors 2 months to live, just about 60 days. And the books she was reading were books to save her mom's life. And I get a call 6 months later, and this young woman, she's crying and crying and crying. And then when she stopped, I find out through tears of joy that her mother not only survived, but it's really getting better. Doctors don't know how, they don't know why, but they called it a miracle, the doctors. But her mother attributed 100% to the great advice she got from her daughter, who learned it from all these books. And in that moment, I realized that if knowledge is power, then learning is our superpower. That if knowledge is power, learning is our superpower, and it's a superpower we all have. You think about it, it's like, when I'm not talking about leaping tall buildings and, shooting lasers out of our eyes. I'm talking about modern day superpowers, like leaping, mental powers, like be able to leap through tall stacks of books, shooting not lasers, but laser focus, and not being bulletproof like Colossus, but having a bulletproof memory. I think those mental superpowers are that our mind is the most amazing gift that we have. It just doesn't come in an owner's manual, and it's not user friendly. So I feel like there are superpowers that we get, even though animals could fly and climb and breathe underwater and go really fast. We can't do any of those things. So our superpowers are mind, but with their mind, we could climb, we could fly, we could breathe underwater, and with amazing technology. But I'm fascinated by this technology.
Love that. And the knowledge that I'm hearing from all of you guys, it kind of reminds me, and this is dating myself a little bit, but some of you guys may know this. There's a superhero sitcom movie, I think it was in the 80s or 90s. It was called The Greatest American Hero. And it's essentially this guy who got this super suit from an alien, but he lost the user manual. So he didn't know how to use it, but he was figuring out how to use it throughout different episodes, right? And that's kind of what I'm hearing here, is that we have this ability, this superpower. And you're right, this is our differentiator from all the other creatures on Earth, is our ability to think and cognize. but we don't have a user manual. And what I'm hearing over and over again from all of you is you are on a mission on how to use different strategies to create user manuals for this, because we don't have that. And that's one thing that schools don't do. They assume that this is how you fly, but they don't actually teach you how to use the super suit. They're like, okay, fly. And you're like, wait, do I take 3 steps? Do I just jump off? Is there a button that I can press? None of that is there, right? And some people can figure it out. Some people have never figured it out their entire life. But what I'm saying here, everyone here is using different strategies for that specific area of learning right there, is how to use that. That's great. I love that. And then the question I want to ask is, and I want to connect the first 2 questions now, and I jump this back to you, Eric. How, if at all, did superheroes and role models from your childhood inspire you to do what you do today in the spirit of teaching, in the strategy, and in how you do and what you do? Is there any of that spirit that powers through in your adult life now and the impact you make in the community?
I think the answer is yes, and I think it maybe goes to the core of why superheroes are so compelling. It's funny, I was just telling my wife last night that I remember in the 1980s, I believe it was, when Marvel was about to go bankrupt and they sold all the intellectual property for $80 million. And I was a lot younger and in the 1980s, but I'm like, man, if I could have raised $80 million, that would have been worth, I don't know how many billions it's worth now. I think it might be in the 3-digit billions for all the Marvel properties. But we've had superheroes. Why have superheroes endured as as an iconic embodiment, I guess, of the human spirit for so long? We started them back in the I would argue they started back in the golden age. You could argue there were superheroes in mythology prior to that, but they weren't really instantiated except in the form of comic books and then later on graphic novels. And why are they so huge now? Why do we need this? And I think it's parallel with the, like reading science fiction. My boys love to read science fiction, and I told them when they were young, and my daughters too, and more fantasy in their case, but is that, we get so caught up in the real world, and Jim, I think you hit on this, in the limitations of our bodies and our minds in the real world. We need to look at other worlds to realize that we don't have to be limited by what we think we're limited by in this world. I go to the gym and my older body now, my shoulders hurt, my back hurts. I just pulled my, muscle the other day, and, I'm limited by all these things. But, the Olympic athletes, they don't allow themselves to be limited by these things. They do things that are superhuman that no other human being has done before. Jim gives a great example of, I feel like I am limited in what my mind can do. Let me see how I can do something that's out of this. And I don't get that from reading just nonfiction, right? There certainly is value between reading history and nonfiction, but we need to look at things outside of the I'll call it the real world, that let us know that it's okay to look outside the real world for things that tell us there don't have to be the limitations that we perceive around us just through our sensory apparatus. I think that's one of the reasons when we look at this and we see somebody flying there, we begin to think, maybe I can't fly, but maybe I can run a lot faster, or maybe I could walk, if I have a limp and, I'm having trouble doing that.
I love that. And so it's this power of inspiration, and that you can do more than what you think and believe you can do currently.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I love that. And that's, I think that's the importance of role models, is for you to see a point B, not just looking at your own area of point A. And that's definitely been true in my life too. Role models have been instrumental in my progress, my journey as a human being, for sure. Many of them were fictional, and I think the fictional ones are my favorite role models, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, Tina, if at all, and as I would like to think the way you're teaching, who and how has superheroes influenced and inspired you in what you do and how you do what you do today with your students?
Well, I like to touch on, like, Jim Quick, like the X-Men. Like, sometimes when I look at my students, they look like all little superheroes to me, actually. So actually, I'm not just like inspired by like my own superheroes, but watching them as well, because they're they're also reading comics as well. They're also watching a lot of like the Marvel, DC, they're watching, and then they bring it to the classroom as well. Like just the other day, I was struggling with a technology issue like on Zoom, and a student just volunteers like, I got this, I'll help you. And just seeing like a small superhero in my classroom just take over and help me out, and then like I would praise them, and I learned something new with them every day. So when it comes with education, like it's so rewarding, and you know, like even I'm learning every day too. And then some of my teachers are actually my students, and it's really cool, and they're all so talented. So yeah, I just love teaching and continuing with this one, but like with the superhero aspects that we needed, not only me, but also the little kids. And the little kids are actually being them already at a very young age. So I teach cute little middle schoolers, and I do see like the superhero coming out of them, and they're very passionate with them. And they also aspire to be like them too. Like they're like, oh, I want to be like Tony Stark. I need to be really good at math and engineering. I want to be an engineer. So those little things. And then for me, I want to be a better teacher. So, you know, like I'll look at like, this one is not really into the Marvel DC universe, but it's like I have a student that really loves Harry Potter. So I was looking at like, you know, the professors, you know, for Harry Potter, like which one do I want to be, like aspire to be? And I saw like, oh, Professor Lupin, he's like a really fun, awesome, engaging teacher. I was like, okay, so like I try to embed that. But I feel like, you know, like storybooks, superheroes, like we all need it. Like it's a perfect role model. It's a perfect like dream, like so we can try to be them. Yeah.
Awesome, very cool. I love the fact that you see your students as heroes, and I think that is of true value because you're already seeing them for their potential, even probably more than they can see themselves. And I think that's very inspiring when someone that you look up to and respects already sees potential in you that you don't realize. I think that's very powerful, actually, especially in a child's life. So thank you for doing all of that, Tina. Jim, what superheroes, if at all any, has inspired you to be who you are today?
Yeah, I'm just continuing the conversation about my answer about the X-Men. You know, I was always interested in Hollywood more because it's interesting, like the scale and the scope of impact. You know, education is here, but entertainment is like 20 stories up in terms of scale. So I was always, you know, I live part-time in Los Angeles, and I coach actors how to speed read scripts and memorize their lines easier and things like that. But I'm just always that like little kid. And, you know, I think that how you empower children is that combination of entertainment plus education, right? Because education itself is not very, for some traditional education, and this is not as like against teachers. My mother became a public school teacher, actually a special ed teacher, to be able to help me with my challenges. It's just a system issue, right? And that's why I love teachers, anybody in that position who's using their creativity, their imagination to create an experience. So I think entertainment is often very, it's like candy. It's people love it, but this doesn't always have nutritional value. But education has a lot of nutritional value, but doesn't taste good. But if you meld those two together, maybe then you can empower children. Going on the X-Men, one of the highlights of my career that spawned the way I changed teaching is I got a call from at the time, the chairman of 20th Century Fox Studios. And I came in and I did a training for him and his executive team. And then afterwards, as a thank you, he gave me a tour of his lot. And I've never been on a film lot, been on a studio lot before. And I saw this movie poster of Wolverine. And I said, in passing, I said, I can't wait for that to come out because it wasn't going to come out for a couple of months. And he picks up his phone. And then 5 minutes later, I'm sitting in the theater with 3D glasses watching Hugh Jackman fight all these super ninjas, right? And afterwards, he comes to get me and says, how was it? And I was like, it was great. It's like, and because it's a Friday afternoon, I'm acting like a kid. And I was like, you don't know this, but I tell my whole story about growing up with learning challenges and teach myself to read comic books, you know, and my favorite were the X-Men, like Wolverine, and it's like, you don't know this, but the big highlight reading the comic book was that the X-Men school for the gifted, you know, Charles Xavier, Professor X's school was in Westchester, New York, a suburb of New York City, where I grew up. And I told them when I was 9 years old, I used to ride my bicycle around my neighborhood trying to find that school because I wanted to run away. and I wasn't really happy in my school. I wanted to find my superpowers and
Yes.
my super friends. And I'm telling this to him, like, and he's like, yeah, Jim, I didn't know you like superheroes. He's like, do you want to go to Comic-Con? I'm like, what do you mean? You want to go to San Diego Comic-Con? And I was like, when is it? He's like, today, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm like, yeah, I would love to. But then I go from a 9-year-old to a 99-year-old. I'm thinking, how do I get to how do I get to San Diego on a Friday? I have nothing to wear. I don't have, tickets, I have all these meetings, like just acting like all. And he's like looking at me bewildered. He's like, do you want to go? I'm going tomorrow. I'm like, oh, you're going. Yeah, I'm gonna go with you. And so he picks me up Saturday morning and we get on, instead of driving, we get on his plane. And when I get on the plane, I swear I'm the last one there. The entire cast of X-Men's on the plane. And they're going to surprise Comic-Con with a surprise appearance. And I don't even see Patrick Stewart or Hugh Jackman. I see Wolverine, Professor X. And I'm sitting between Jennifer Lawrence, Halle Berry, going to San Diego Comic-Con on a Saturday, right? Totally unplanned. And amazing day, obviously. Come back, fast forward. Then he's like, how's your day? And I was like, this is the best ever. You don't know. I was like, oh my God. And he was like, I have something else for you. I'm like, I don't want anything else. Like, tell me what I could do for you. And he was like, they really loved you. He's like, you want to go on set? I'm like, what do you mean? He was like, we have another 30 days of filming Days of Future Past, X-Men in Montreal. You want to go? And I was like, wow, I've never been on a film set before. What can I do for you? He's like, do the same thing you did for us. Teach them how to speed your scripts, memorize line, be focused on camera. I'm like, I could totally do that. Next morning, Sunday morning, we get on the X-Jet and we're heading to Montreal, and I'm sharing with the cast and crew like these techniques. But long story short, the first scene we shoot in Montreal takes place in the X-Men school, and I get choked up thinking about it, because as a 9-year-old, seeing my heroes come to life in the school, that I've been like searching for, messes with my mind, my spirit, something fierce. But when I get home, the highlight was this. I don't know if I could share screen. There's a package waiting for me. And I open it up, it's a portrait, it's a photograph, framed photograph of me and the entire cast of X-Men. I'm that Asian dude in the middle. Like, who photoshopped that Asian dude in the middle? With Hugh Jackman and Jennifer Lawrence and James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, Halle Berry, just everybody. But even better than that was a note from the chairman that said, Jim, thank you for sharing your superpowers with all of us. I know you've been searching for your superhero school since you were a kid. Here's your class photograph. And I get choked up thinking about it, because from there, I got to see the movie to, what would it do, like $750 million or whatever, that franchise. And I just made me think about education and how it doesn't scale like that. And it made me think about how I can make things more entertaining. How can I create an online, school for superheroes? And so from there, we launched our podcast and wrote the book and created these online programs, because I wanted to kind of in my mind maybe be that Professor X, to help gather disenfranchised people who maybe don't believe themselves, regardless of their age and stage, and show them their real capabilities, And so I really think that part of it is imagine the thing you want most and cultivate that, see it, feel it, believe in it, and then we work daily for it.
I love it. Wow, it's such a powerful story. And I'm seeing again, patterns in all the way your answers from all of you is you all see an issue, a problem within, again, the superpower of the human being, which is learning and imagination and cultivation of the mind. And that becomes your mission. You want to use your time here, your abilities to make that impact. And not just for yourself, but for many in either finding their career, or them as students, or them being able to unlock their own innate learning potentials. That you're going after it's a very common problem in this case. The villain, or what you're fighting, is the system, which has been a problem for many students trying to learn, and you're actually now addressing that in your own ways, your own strategies, to be the solution, for lack of a better word, the hero mission that you've taken on. I love that. Such a powerful story. One more question I want to ask all of you is, and now we've gotten such a great flavor and color of this. Jumping over to you, Eric, what advice, what would you actually tell current and future teachers that they could take from this, from you, and your lessons now, that they could change and alter the system to make it new ways to learn, new levels to learn for the future generation of students coming in now as we're progressing in this evolution of learning and teaching?
It's a great and important question. And to be honest with you, I don't think my answer is going to resonate with most teachers. I think it will resonate with some, but I think others will look at it and they'll immediately shut down. And you'll understand what I'm saying in a second. What Jim said is absolutely true. And I've thought this since the time, well, since I was a student, and then watching my kids, I have 4 kids go through school, was teachers should never be teaching kids what they need to think. They need to teach them how to think. And I paraphrased you a little bit, Jim. And if you have that conversation with many instructors, and good instructors and bad instructors, every single one of them say, I absolutely tell kids how to think. I don't teach them what to think. But if you look at the problems we're having with free speech limitations on campus, you can see that's clearly not true, at least not universally true, where they say, well, no, we're teaching them how to think, but they need to come up with these conclusions and these ideas. And if their ideas don't match what my personal ideas are, and you see this with the shutdown of conservative values and conservative thoughts on campus, then clearly, we're going to teach them what to think, and they need to think in this exact same way. And, from in the history of, teaching, this goes from the time kids are young until the time they're old, it should never have been, I'm going to teach them in a way that they think exactly how I think, and their ideas and their religious ideas and their personal moral ideas and their political ideas must match mine, or else, the education system has failed. And I would say that's probably where we're running into the largest problems now. And I see this, in my young children, I see it in my older children. One of my daughters went to, when they were still going to public school, came back and said, oh, we did a faux voting, thing at school. And when they didn't come up with the same voting, for the candidate that the teachers wanted them to come up with, there was certainly a stigmatism, as well. No, you can't vote for that person because that person's not morally right. You need to vote for this person. And no teacher should ever say that. And then, you get to the older, where one of my sons was in university, and, the teachers started talking about white privilege. And, say, well, white privilege is a universal but invisible backpack. This is kind of one of the fun memes. It gives you all the tools you need to succeed in life. And my son, who's only a quarter white, and, we're Americans, we're all mixed race Americans. I said, well, I'm a quarter white, so is my backpack a quarter full, or is it a quarter empty, or is it a quarter visible, or a quarter invisible? And the teacher, I said, what did the teacher do? He said the teacher got upset because she was trying to teach me a specific thing that I needed to think. And when I countered that with, the reality of, which is, his thing is, I'm not white, but I'm not white either. So you're trying to put me into a box, and I'm not sure what box that fits into. And he said the teacher got very upset with him. I said, did you push it? He goes, no, because I wanted to get an A in the class. And that's the reality, right? He's going to go ahead and do what the teacher and say what the teacher wants him to say in order to do that. And I think that's probably the worst thing we're seeing on campuses. And we see it from, young ages, as I gave an example at the university, is you have to think a certain way. Teachers, they'll say, oh, I absolutely teach them how to think. But no, you're teaching them what to think because you think there is a moral rightness behind thinking the way that you think. And that's not necessarily correct. That's, that's the weakness of every dictatorial society in the history of man, is that, I am the sole source of all morality. So like I said, that probably won't go over very well, I think, with a lot of folks. And some other folks will listen to it and go, that's true, but I can't actually speak out and say that because I'll be castigated and ostracized if I do that.
Right. Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. And you're right. There's a very strong pattern in terms of, because, teachers, for lack of a better word, are human. And so they are fallible by human standards like everyone else is, right? And if they have a certain way that they feel like they have to produce a product, then the students, whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, will become a bystander of that particular process.
Correct.
So yeah. Tina, what advice would you give to future current teachers and how they could improve their current level of teaching for the next generation? And then why?
I would say like develop your own style and stick with it. Like, as this amazing like superhero, we don't want 100 Spider-Mans. That'd be awesome if we have 100 of them. But like, we do want our own unique powers to show. So keep your own style. And I really like what Eric Basu said. We don't want like everyone to think the same way. I don't think that's gonna be advantageous at all. So like for our school, I love that we're doing a lot of project-based learning. So students can bring their strengths, to the classroom. It doesn't have to be like just like this one assessment, like an ABC test, and we're using project-based so they can use their skills of art, maybe speaking and so forth. So yeah, my biggest advice to like teachers is to keep your own style, use your strengths, and don't try to become like other teachers. Like just be yourself and flaunt your strength.
I love that. So just like every superhero, we don't have 100 Supermans or 100 Batmans or 100 Wolverines. Every superhero uses their own. And that's what the X-Men are, right? Everyone brings in their different strengths and creates a really effective team because everyone does different things and actually plays to who they really are, not just trying to be the iconic, typical type of superhero image. Cool, very cool. So, Jim, what advice would you give current future teachers on how to really change and improve the system to the next level to really impact the next generation?
Yeah. No, a few quick thoughts. I love what Eric and Tina were talking about because the education system when it started, it's when you think about how churches started universities, and it's very assembly line, cookie cutter approach, right? Where it's kind of for a lot of times systematically it was kind of one size fits all, and now it's getting more custom, it's getting more personalized and experiential. I would say that I look to Stan a lot for just he was I believe the life we live are the lessons we teach. And
Stan Lee.
Sorry, I have a picture of Stan. I actually keep on the.
He
gave me this art piece up here on my wall. It's made up out of candy, complete candy and jelly beans and bubble gum and stuff like that. But he was just a big kid, and I remember a number of lessons from him that I think we could directly apply to the classroom. And I'm also part of the Stan Lee Foundation. I'm one of his founding circle members and advisors, and bringing education, entertainment into the classrooms. So I would say that once I got to introduce him to Richard Branson, actually, they wanted to meet each other, and so we go to dinner. And in the car, I asked Stan. I had to ask. I was like, you co-created everybody, right? All of my favorite superheroes, Pantheon. Who's your favorite? And without a pause, he says, "It's Jim. It's Iron Man." And I was like, "That's awesome." And it's like, "Jim, who's your favorite superhero?" And he had this Spider-Man tie, so I went with Spider-Man. I was like, I said, Spider-Man. And without a pause, in his iconic voice, he goes, "With great power comes great, responsibility." We all know that, right? And it's like in all our DNA. Even if people don't watch superhero, they know it, and we don't remember where we first heard it. But maybe because I've had 3 traumatic brain injuries before age 12, I read or hear. Sometimes I still switch things around. And I was like, you're right. With great power comes great responsibility. And the opposite is also true. With great responsibility comes great power. And, when we take responsibility for something, we have great power to make it better. And I feel like one of the onus, teachers could do what they could do, but I would always be conscious of our words, because sometimes, I think this conversation is really about transcending. It's about ending the trance. Kids, students of all ages and stages, and adults do this too. Our words have power. And, when we say we can't do something, or that we're at the effect, we're a victim, I feel like instead we need to teach kids to be responsible for their thoughts, their actions, their behavior, their habits. I think self-awareness is a superpower. I think that, even when we teach, we can't, the human brain doesn't learn through consumption. It learns through creation and creativity. The things that are truly limitless, right? There's no limit to our creativity, to our imagination, to human determination, to our ability to come together. And I would just remind kids that they are a thermostat, they're not a thermometer. A thermometer just reacts to the environment. And I see kids and older kids, adults, reacting. We react to the weather, we react to politics, we react to, how people treat us. And true, like we're all human, we all are affected. but to the degree we identify more with the thermostat, a thermostat doesn't react to the environment. It gauges the environment intelligently, but then it sets a temperature and the environment reacts to it, right? And I think that it's important for people to remember their agency. You know, they don't give up their sovereignty all the time, and they take responsibility, you know, in the role that they're playing in their learning, in their own education. That it's not just the teacher's job to just input it in and just make them consume it. It's, you know, part of the kids' responsibility for get up and be active in the process. You know, so I learned a lot. I did a podcast episode after when Stan passed on just the 4 things that I would apply to just teaching. You know, for 4 P's: projection. You know, for him, his imagination was a superpower, right? Knowledge is what is, imagination is what could be, but he took everything that was invisible in his mind and made it visible. You know, and so as much as we can unlock the kids' imagination, I would say second P besides projection is play. You know, I don't think we grow older because, you know, I don't think we stop playing because we grow older. I think we grow older because we stop playing, and play is such an integral part to the learning process, because fear of making mistakes and looking bad will often hamper our ability to think and achieve. You know, and I think it's important for kids to know that failure is not the opposite of success, it's part of success, right? And so part of play creates an attitude of enjoyment around the learning. And then finally, passion and purpose, meaning like Stan, for me, as I observed him, had 2 passions. You know, he loved storytelling and he loved his wife. You know, so it's just like very great example for me. But for me, I think passion is what lights you up, and purpose is how you use that passion to light other people up. So my passion is learning. My purpose is teaching other people how to learn. And I think Stan was really on purpose because his passion was stories, and his purpose was telling stories to other people so that they could be lit up. And so anything that fosters in you know, using projection and imagination, using play in the classroom, helping kids, you know, identify a little bit more where they're, giving them enough novelty to see where their passions get called to, and then helping them define reasons, because I think with reasons come results. Like a lot of kids, they don't understand why they should study sine, cosine, tangent, like whatever they study, because we don't give them context for the reason and purpose of this information, you know, and then they're not as likely to get engaged. So I appreciate, yeah. So that would be my answer. Those 4 P's and responsibility.
I love that. I love that very much. And we're at the end of our interview, which I think went by so fast because I have a million other questions for all of you guys. But this is the time we have allotted for us. So what I've gotten from this was such an insight on my superhero panel here. Don't forget who your childhood inspirations are, whether they're fictional or real. Hold on to those. That's essentially your core values. Decide what you want to do, your impact. And if your heroes were truly your heroes, let the spirit of who they were guide you and how you want to do it. Not just what you're told to do, but also discover your own way of how you want to present that. And hopefully you find teachers that actually encourage you to figure out your how as well as your why and your what. And then also, if you are teachers yourself, and many people will be teachers in their path, don't forget that important part. And finally, really understand the ways that you can impact the way you teach, the way people transfer information, the responsibility you have as a teacher, the power you have on young minds that look up to you for guidance and essentially authority. So thank you, Eric. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Jim, for being superheroes, role models, icons. My personal heroes, I look to all of you guys to be my inspiration on how I teach my students and mentor them. And thank you for keeping a beacon. Thank you for keeping a light. And thank you for setting an example for all of us. I hope to see you guys in person really soon. And thank you for sharing all of your knowledge and experience with Comic-Con today. Take care, you guys, and talk to you again soon, okay?
Yeah, thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.